Welcome to Interian Security Insights. In this episode, I want to talk about a governance problem that still exists in many Microsoft Entra environments. Many tenants look secure on paper. Conditional access is configured. Privileged identity management is enabled. Role-based access control has been cleaned up. But despite all of that, many tenants remain structurally fragile. Why? Because administrative authority often still applies far more broadly than organizations realize. And that is the hidden governance gap. RBAC defines what an administrator can do. Privileged identity management defines when they can activate elevated privileges, but neither of those controls actually defines where that authority should apply inside the tenant. And that distinction matters more than many organizations think. If your tenant is structurally flat, an administrator who is only supposed to manage users in one region or one subsidiary can still end up affecting identities across the entire tenant. Not because the permissions were misconfigured, but because no internal boundaries were ever defined. This is where administrative boundary design becomes important. In Microsoft Entra, administrative units provide a native mechanism to scope administrative authority. Instead of assigning tenant-wide reach, you can limit administrative actions to a defined subset of users, groups, or devices. So instead of treating the tenant as one open administrative plane, you begin to introduce internal governance boundaries. That changes the model significantly, because delegation is no longer just based on trust or process. It becomes something that can actually be enforced architecturally, and this becomes particularly relevant in enterprise environments. Think about multinational organizations. Think about regional IT teams. Think about mergers and acquisitions, or environments where central IT should not automatically have operational reach into every identity or device across the tenant. Without administrative boundaries, the tenant remains structurally flat. And a flat tenant means a larger operational blast radius. Administrative boundary design reduces that blast radius. It improves accountability, and it creates a much more defensible governance model. Now, once you start thinking in terms of boundaries, another question appears. What about your most sensitive identities? Emergency access accounts, privileged service identities, executive accounts. This is where restricted management administrative units can play an important role. They allow organizations to place highly sensitive resources into a more tightly controlled boundary, which means that even highly privileged administrators do not automatically retain operational control over those objects unless access is explicitly scoped. But the bigger point is not just the feature itself. The bigger point is that many Microsoft Entra tenants lack an explicit model for administrative segmentation. They may be secure from an authentication perspective. They may have strong privilege hygiene. But the tenant structure itself remains flat. And that becomes visible very quickly in enterprise governance. It becomes visible during audits. It becomes visible in delegated administration models. It becomes visible during acquisitions or organizational restructuring. And it becomes visible when organizations need to demonstrate clear accountability boundaries. This is why I see administrative boundary design as a governance architecture topic, not just a configuration topic. In practice, many tenants evolve through several maturity stages. At the lowest level, tenants are flat. Then they become role-structured. Delegation starts to appear. Governance becomes segmented. And eventually, boundary enforcement becomes continuous. That is the moment where a tenant moves from being technically secure to being structurally defensible. Administrative boundary design is often the missing layer in Microsoft Entra governance. It is what transforms a loosely trusted tenant into a more controlled and accountable architecture. If you want to explore this concept further, including the full 5-level governance maturity model, you can read the full article on Blog.Interian.be. And if your organization is working through these governance questions in practice, whether around tenant segmentation, identity governance, or administrative boundary design, it can also help to work with an experienced Microsoft security partner such as Easy to translate these concepts into an implementable architecture. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode of Interian Security Insights.